Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Emerald Gates session. This is green tea. It comes from Hunan province, a very beautiful area of Hunan province, the Wuling Mountains. Wuling Mountains run from Sichuan, which is in southwest China, through Guizhou, up through a portion of western Hunan province. The overall characteristics of these mountains are very much like the World Heritage Zhangjiajie Mountains. In other words, they shoot out of the ground. They've got these interesting formations that trap fog. They've got an environment which is a little bit more humid, but it's high enough that in some places it actually snows. And so actually in the set of pictures we sent you, there's a snow picture in one of those, because that's a recent picture of heavy snows that fell on that area. Usually the snow doesn't stick on the ground for very long, which is good because the tea bushes wouldn't appreciate that. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I first, though, want to go through shop business and anecdotes that have come up this week. First off, I want to welcome two newcomers to the tea family on for the first time, I believe, today. Dylan and Valerie out in Colorado, welcome. You're in for a great session today. Secondly, this has been an interesting week from a couple of standpoints that through the years, particularly through these last 3 or 4 years, we've gotten a lot of requests. And I've never really shared these with you, but I thought you might be interested in the types of requests that we get. And these requests actually reflect what people in China who have extensive tea connections or tea shops would get. And these are requests for us to look for specific teas in China. Now, sometimes we get the requests to look for those teas in India or other places. We obviously can't do that because we're not connected. We're not plugged in to those places. We're plugged into China, and we're plugged in at both the state level and the individual farmer level, as well as the science and agricultural levels. So at each of those levels, we have very good connections, which allows us to find a variety of things for those who have the request. Now, finding things doesn't mean that there's a cut rate price at doing that, because there isn't. China these days is very expensive in terms of teas. And when we get things that we know that you'll like, so sometimes we're getting gifts these days, we do let you know, or we serve it at private sessions in here. So those who are tea members will see some of those sessions. And the rest of you, if you've been with us for a long time, you'll also have access to the occasional things that come through here that are unexpected. And we get some really odd requests, but understandable requests. So I got a request from Oregon from a person who's been here several times, loves our cliff teas, loves ancient woodland, which is a fully fermented tea. And he's looking for tea bricks from a certain purveyor, not a certain purveyor, certain producer in Yunnan province who's very famous. And we've actually experienced tea from this particular producer. And so he just wrote to me this week and asked if we can find that. The odds are we can find it. The odds are it will probably be at such a large cost to actually purchase it that that may not go through, because this is looking for a tea brick that was produced in the 90s by a very specific famous tea producer. So that's some of the interesting things that happened this week. Before we get into Emerald Gates, let's do a little science. Love doing science. Sometimes I do a good job. Sometimes I make a mess out of it. Let's see if I can do a good job this morning. So talking green tea, there's a lot of current research on catechins. Now let's remind ourselves what catechins are. Catechins are bioactive molecules that are primarily, but not solely, found in green tea. They're also found in white tea, but green tea has had the most research done on it vis-a-vis catechins. And you have 4 or 5 of these. Actually, you have 6 or 7 of these catechins. So there's several different bioactive molecules, but the one that everybody always gets excited about is EGCG, because that's the one in test tubes, as it turns out, seems to destroy tumors. Now, let me repeat that so that none of you walk away with saying, hey, he said it cures cancer. This is not what I said. What I said is in a test tube, it kills tumors. Kills probably isn't the right word, destroys tumors, takes them apart. We don't know, scientists don't know, there have been no good studies, although everybody's working real hard on this right now, to indicate that these molecules do the exact same thing in the body if encountering a tumor. Don't know, but it's nice as a starter that that occurs in test tubes. So I mentioned EGCG. I guess that's where the science is going to come today. So there's 2 studies in 2 widely different fields that I saw by coincidence this week. One is about EGCG along with the other catechins, because remembering there's probably some synergy. No, strike that. There is synergy between all of these molecules. We don't exactly understand fully what that synergy is, but EGCG for sure seems to be the most active, especially when it comes to relieving colitis, giving comfort, not comfort, but actually changing the symptoms, kind of eliminating the symptoms for IBD. So these are intestinal, gut microbiota imbalances probably, or inflammations in the gut. And they did research last year, extensive research. And yes, I need to qualify this because this research wasn't on humans. This research was on mice. So this is an animal study where they caused the mice to have imbalances in the gut microbiota, gave them these bioactive compounds in green tea, and saw that the symptoms went away, that the pathology went away. So that's a really interesting study because anecdotally, over the years, we've heard the Japanese talk about the ability of green tea to balance the microbiota. The issue, and the reason you're hearing it for the first time from me here, is I've never seen supporting studies for that. So just saying it doesn't make it true. However, now that the Chinese are doing these type of studies, it's interesting that they're finding that particularly EGCG seems to have a very beneficial effect in mice. Next step is to figure out how to test that on humans. So that's one study. Second study comes from the plant world itself. So scientists have looked for a long time at the differences in chemical composition between teas from different terroirs. And there are differences. Some have more concentration of amino acids. Some have more concentration of catechins. And this is by category. In other words, you wouldn't expect a white and a green tea from, even if they're growing side by side, to have the same concentrations, chemical components. But these are, I'm talking about green tea plants is where this study was going around China. And so there's been plenty of those studies which show that different plants from different places have different footprints, so to speak, chemical footprints. What hasn't been shown, and this study set out to show and did show, is that time of pick turns out to be important. So if you're picking in the early spring and you have a leaf bud and a leaf, or a leaf bud and two leaves, the EGCG component of that is the most at that time. Later picks, progressively less. Other catechins increase. So you have this offset that occurs depending on the time of year that you pick. And it's actually, so if you're looking at why you would be drinking green tea, so you and I drink green tea because it tastes good, all right? So that's the reason you and I drink it. But some people purchase and drink because their doctor told them to. They have heart disease. The studies seem to show that green tea is good for that. You have people who read nutritional labels. They read articles which seem to indicate that green tea has other beneficial effects. But I ask you this, most of the time, when you're looking at these type of articles, they're very generalized. They know the compound, which seems to be most bioactive. Everybody knows that EGCG. You see that thrown around all the time. However, they don't know when and where it's most active or most present. And this is what this study addressed. So it's really interesting stuff to keep in the back of your minds. There'll be more information as scientists do more and more research on this area, because after all, if there are any benefits to be had, and I should state that in another way, we know there are benefits. If we want to increase the benefit of what we're getting, we probably need to pay attention to these. And scientists have always told us in China that these spring picks are always the best from a chemical footprint point of view. And we take them at face value, but it's nice to see studies coming along with some verification of that. All right, enough of the science, yes?
During the change in seasons, does the ECGC itself change into other catechins, or does that balance change in some other way?
So this is a great question. Clearly a scientist asked it, and I love the way you phrased it, because the question has to do with the change in EGCG. So when it changes, is it changing into other catechins? So in this article that I read this week, it doesn't directly make that statement, but it certainly implies it by saying, well, you reduce EGCG and one of the other catechins, but these other things increase. So it sounds like that's what may be happening. Although I really don't want to say that as an authoritative sentence, because the article didn't say the EGCG transforms into EGC or one of the other catechin compounds. It makes sense because the catechins, they're polyphenols, right? And the polyphenols in tea are what each of these styles of making tea are changing. So what do I mean by that? Catechins in green tea, if you, instead of doing green tea, and we'll talk about the process of green tea in a minute, if instead of doing the process of green tea, you do the process of red/black tea, the catechins actually transform into theorubicins and theaflavins. This is well known, well studied, it's proven. And that's a direct change because of the oxidation of the polyphenols. In other words, it changes as soon as you start oxidizing. Now, let's think about green tea for a minute. Green tea is unoxidized. However, when you're aging or you're changing the format of the leaf, in other words, when it's a bud, you have the maximum power packed in there because the bud, and I'm talking about leaf bud, is what has to produce 5 or 6 leaves. And therefore, everything that you're going to end up with in an unoxidized tea starts there. And obviously, as more leaves come out, there is a reduction in the strength of what's left over in that bud. But this is far afield from your question. And so your question is, the correct answer is I don't know for sure. The article implied that that's the case and did not mention any other compounds that they think that it might turn into. And in a way, even as I go through this explanation with you and thinking about the catechins to the theaflavins, theorubicins process, it makes me believe, yeah, EGCG is changing into another catechin. All right, here we go. Emerald Gates, Hunan province. Who grows this stuff? Actually, in this area, there's a lot of Miao people and Tu people. Those are the names of the two groups, the minority groups that live there. And by the way, I should make clear, because I think sometimes with China it gets really, really confusing, because we know that there are minorities that live in China, but they keep popping up in all these tea growing regions. And that would be natural when you think about it, because most of the minorities in China are doing some sort of agricultural work, more of them as a percentage than of the Han. And when you think of the total number, the gross number of minorities in China is 85 to 90 million, maybe a little bit more than that, maybe about 95 million people. So that's like 1/3 or a little less of the US population. So it's a sizable number, but in terms of Chinese population, it's a mere pittance. It's 4 to 5%. But in this area in Hunan, you have a lot of Miao people and a lot of Tu people. The Miao and Tu are very close. They wear costumes that look very similar. There are differences. Their customs have a lot of similarities. So they may have had a common ancestor at some point. They have their own languages. But they're the ones who are growing Emerald Gates. Emerald Gates is not nationally known in China. This is a funny statement, given that Beijing has commented on Emerald Gates before. And really, it would have been more accurate if I had said it certainly isn't drunk much outside of Hunan. It's famous because this was an early green tea that achieved great popularity in that region. And then also by early, and I'm talking about probably in the late Tang Dynasty, it was already a tribute tea. But today, it's called a small varietal tea. So this is a specialized term. And this term I translated literally just now. And really what it means is it's only grown in one small section of the country. And that's it, not grown anywhere else. And this is where this varietal comes from. we stumbled across this thing some 10, 12 years ago and have liked it ever since because it has a different emphasis. And you'll see that today when we actually steep it. All right, so let's go through the green tea process. You know what? Let's not go through the green tea process until we start steeping. So remembering that we're going to demonstrate first, the tea master will come over here and apply her tremendous skills to steeping this, and then you'll steep the second time with her. So it is my great pleasure to bring over Xiaobei to brew with you. Emerald Gates.
Emerald Gates. Okay. Today we do green tea, huh? So, yeah. This is the full green tea. Okay, we do. So same temperature, huh? Water is 175.
Okay, so you see her tableau here, and this is simple. 2 glasses. You don't have to have this, but you certainly have to have the 2 glasses and the strainer. Those are absolute requirements. This is nice because when you're dissipating the heat, that's a nice tool to use. And you'll see what I mean in a minute when you see her use that. This is a spring pick, and it's a bud and a leaf. All right, so what she's done is she's drawn 200-degree water, and she's making sure that the surfaces of the insides of the glass are absolutely spotless. And by spotless, really, I know all of you have clean glasses. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about occasionally soap spots secretly stick on glasses. And other things secretly stick on glasses. You want none of that because they influence flavor. Tea is sensitive to perfumes, lotions, flavors of all sorts. As it turns out, tea leaves attract aromas better than baking soda. So if you put tea leaves in your refrigerator trying to reduce aromas, it'll work. That's uncovered tea leaves. You don't want to do that with the stuff you get from here. All right, so she's now drawn 175-degree water. She is aerating or dissipating the heat. She's doing both, dissipating the heat. Remembering, if you're going to air at all on temperature, air on the side of less. Don't air on the side of more. Why? If you err on the side of more, all of us have gone into those chains, and I can't even remember their names, and they use 200+ degree water, steep your tea, and it tastes flat. That's what you get when you use the wrong temperature. When you use the right temperature, you get brighter and brighter. And if you use a lesser temperature as opposed to a greater temperature, you get very bright. So she's heated up the glass. Make sure it's absolutely clear. Aerated the water, dissipated the steam, puts the leaves in. What do you do now? You shake. You shake because you want the leaves to start to be exposed to heat. And as they're exposed to heat, then the aroma starts to come out better.
Should we start the water cooler than the 175 instead of aerating the water?
Started at 175. Yes, you should start at 175 and aerate and cool.
Okay, so the answer is no. Don't start any cooler. Start at the 175.
Oh, I see. I misunderstood your question. Yeah, no. Start at the 175. Cool it down this way, because remember, if you start it at a cooler temperature but you don't aerate it, you're also not going to get that benefit. All right, and this is 3 minutes. So that's 5 grams you put in there. It's already pre-measured in the bag. You don't have to do any measuring. You put the cooled water in here and you heat up the receptacle cup. And take a look at how beautiful this is, both top and bottom. Kind of have some floating up and down.
Is aeration the same as reduction of steam?
No, it's two different things. Aeration, you're introducing oxygen into the water, right? Reduction of steam, you're dissipating the steam, in effect, reducing the temperature. So there's really two different things going on with this at the same time. All right, so what is the process of green tea? And how long has green tea been around? Well, let's answer the easy thing first. Green tea's been around for ages, and this is Chinese ages. Historically, they think that as long ago as 2,000 to 3,000 years, or even more, that tea had already been discovered for its, in quotes, medicinal uses. It wasn't being used as a beverage consistently until about 1,500 years ago, as far as we can tell. It was originally a standalone Chinese medicine. Then it became a catalyst used with other Chinese medicines. And eventually it became a beverage. So that's its history. We don't know precisely where the first tea plant started, but it's most likely to have been in Yunnan, Southwest China. There are other theories that say simultaneously in Sichuan, tea plants started growing, but we are not convinced by any current evidence, although everybody's working on this right now. Over the years, the Chinese became more and more skilled. The farmers became more and more skilled at processing green tea. So the process is basically as follows. You pick, you wither slightly, not for very long, maybe an hour, maybe 2 at most, sometimes as little as 30 minutes to 45 minutes. You then apply heat. Actually, before you apply heat, you do one other important thing, and that is you sort through and make sure that there's no extraneous protein or no extraneous minerals in the tea. All right, the timer has gone off. And very deliberately, you're pouring the tea, you're separating the tea from the tea leaves. Not in a hurry, just nice and easy. You're not trying to create bubbles. You want to make sure that all the water is out, away from the tea leaves, because if you leave water in there, your second steeping won't be as good, because it will have continued steeping and you will have been unaware of it. That's not a good thing. All right, so what else do you do? We first start out looking at the quality arena. So we first want to look at these leaves and then smell these leaves. You're trying to get a sensibility about this. Okay, and then you take a look at the beauty of this. From my perspective, this is a light green, just a tinge, just the slightest tinge of a little yellow. And you're going to take a 175-degree sip. 175-degree sip actually allows you to coat your tongue. This is not a oolong tea where it's a 200-degree aspiration or inhalation. This is, you can take a little bit more. You're still careful. So you roll this around your mouth. You're not focused the first time on taste. You're really focused the first time through on mouthfeel. How's your tongue feel? Sides of your mouth? How'd it go down? You have an aftertaste. By the way, there's a distinctive aftertaste on this. And what sort of energetics? What do I mean by energetics? Every time you go through T rhythm, and you can use T rhythm with anything that you consume, there is a feeling that your body gets, and it'll tell you, oh, I'm feeling warmer, or I'm feeling cooler, or my extremities are changing, it seems. There's all sorts of feelings you can have. And those are energetics. So I'm going to take a second sip here. And what I'm really trying to do now is focus on the aroma and on the taste, because I've already established the quality characteristics of this. So remember, first quality, then aroma and taste, because who the heck cares what something smells like if the quality is no good? You know, you take something very thin, very astringent. Oh no, I can't drink this. It smells great. It smells like peppermint. No, you're not going to drink that. And you certainly won't find that here at Sophie's. All right, so it's your turn to brew. Get everything out of the way. Tea Master will brew with you. So remembering is the first thing you do is you draw any temperature of hot water. So if you use a full boil, that's fine. If you use 175, that's fine. This is to make sure that there are no soap spots or anything left on the cup. And it's also to heat the cup, because remember, in this routine, we're going to put the tea leaves in the cup and we're going to heat them up. And this is why we go through this. I'm going to set the timer here. Your timer should be set for 3 minutes. And Tea Master is drawing 175-degree water. So using this cup, this is a convenience and a technique. Because if you're using a metal pot, for example, are you able to cool the water as fast? And the answer is no. Glass dissipates heat. So it dissipates heat the fastest. So that's why we use this particularly with this tea, because this is more delicate tea. More delicate tea needs more attention in terms of temperature. Remembering less is better. If you end up cooling it off to 165, you're going to love this stuff. Oh, I'm sorry. And you take it out of baggie number 2, put it in the cup, shake it. And then smell. So this sets a baseline, because remembering smell and taste are related. They're connected. This is why you start out this way.
The leaves are so finely rolled, beautiful mottled green, slightly veggie scent in the bag. First aroma in the cup, there is none, question mark, but bam, then the taste.
So great comment. Leaves are delicate. They've clearly been rolled. And we'll talk about rolling in a minute, because that's part of the processing. The first hint of scent was what again? Grassy?
Pardon me. there's a vegginess.
A
in the
vegginess.
scent in
There
the
you go.
bag, in the bag at least.
Yeah,
But then after the brewing, it's like, where's the scent?
yeah. So this is why, and this is a great comment because the commentator says, where's the scent after the brewing? And what this tells you is that tasting tea and selecting tea is an entire process. When we first opened, we had so many people come in here. I want to smell the dry leaves. And after a while, in the beginning, Xiaobei and I said, no, you're not going to get anything from that. And you could see the look of disbelief on people's faces. And so after a while, we just stopped explaining. Okay, you can smell the dry leaves. And of course, what do you smell? Next to nothing. You must start to apply heat to start to get some sensibility of what the aroma is going to be. Yes.
One person finds the leaves has a very distinctive aroma, but you can't quite place it. Another says his sense of the warm leaves is that in the cup is a sort of multi-hay scent.
Oh, I kind of like both these comments. Multi-hay scent was one comment. That's about the dried leaves in the heated cup. And the other commentator said it's really hard to put words to what they're smelling. They clearly smell something, but putting the right words on them, hard to do. And this is reflective of tea in general, because remember, tea isn't really part of our historical background. It's really part of the Chinese historical background. Been drinking it for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. They've developed a vocabulary. We're still developing vocabulary around tea. Yes.
Somebody else gets a buttery scent from the warm leaves.
Love this comment. A buttery scent from the warm leaves, implying as soon as you drink it, this is going to influence what you look for. And I almost guarantee when we start hearing the comments about what people actually have tasted, we're going to find a certain term used and it'll go back to this buttery scent. Yes.
Someone else is getting a sweetness to that multi-hay as well.
Great observation. Now you're getting a fuller range, a sweetness with that multi-hay. That is an absolute great pickup. And this is the reason I don't give away stuff, because all of us, if we take the time and go through this rhythm, we're going to capture these things. No question. All right, timer goes off. You're not in a hurry. You're going to separate the leaves from the tea liquor. You want to make sure all of that liquid goes in the recipient glass.
A lot of trichomes in there.
Oh, yes, great comment. A lot of trichomes. For those of you who don't know what trichomes are, those are the little white hairs floating around in the tea. This isn't mean that the tea master kicked up some dust and white hairs were the result. These white hairs actually come from the leaves. And what they are, they appear to be nature's way of dealing with excess pests, because the pests take a bite of these, they're bitter to the pest goes to other plants. So, and these things are rich in polyphenols. So these are good things. You like seeing trichomes. More is better. So go through the quality arena here. Go through the steps of tasting. So you first establish a baseline in the aroma. And this is cool enough that you can really stick your nose in here. And then what you're trying to do on that first sip is clarify and observe mouthfeel, tongue feel, aftertaste, and energetics if there are any. Now, if you tell me this tea doesn't have any energetics, that's okay. That's not a problem. If you haven't detected energetics, we're all different. So we're going to have different detection or non-detection experiences. So don't feel badly if you can't detect energetics. Yes.
Front of mouth viscosity, astringency, but limited to the middle of the tongue, clean, smooth swallow.
Front of tongue, astringency, viscosity, I'm sorry. Then middle of the tongue, astringency, and then a clean, smooth swallow. I love this description because didn't somebody say buttery? Oh, yes. So buttery and viscosity, they're related. Oh, wait a minute. Clean and smooth. That's all related too. So this tea, when you think of green teas, normally most people who aren't drinking these teas here, especially first timers, come in and say, give me green tea. Docs told me I have to drink it. But try not to make it bitter. The answer is ours are not bitter. And that's because of the quality of the tea and how it's processed. Not processed, how it is brewed.
It's as if the tea peeled back its layers in the brewing process and now very buttery.
It's as if the tea peeled back its layers and now it's very buttery. And I love this description because Xiaobei and I have always been impressed with the butteriness, with the cleanness. There's one other word I haven't heard yet, but when I hear it, I'm going to let you know that that's one of the descriptors that we use for this tea. Yes.
Somebody else in the wet leaves gets not only butter, but a touch of seaweed.
Okay, so there's a not only butter, but a touch of seaweed. So a little umami in there. So that's a great catch because green tea typically always has some sort of umami, and you've named it. You've said it's almost as if it's seaweed umami, that type of savoriness to it. And yeah.
Wet leaves had grassiness that was very refreshing in the mouthfeel, smooth, tingly on the tongue, clean taste, really fresh.
Great commentary. Smooth, tingling on the tongue, and really fresh. The fresh is what I was looking for, because when we describe to people this tea, that's the first word out of our mouth, fresh. It just has that more than any grassiness, more than any vegetal. Buttery, I like also because it's that viscosity. Clean, fresh and clean, though, are the two words that we use to characterize this. So while you're still typing, let me continue with the processing modality. So we wither. What does wither mean? You put the tea leaves on bamboo baskets, only a leaf or two thick, and you let it get sunned so that it reduces its moisture content. If it's raining, cloudy, or dewy, you do this indoors. Why do you do this? Because fully moist, and that's not the right description, a leaf that doesn't have any water evaporated from it is hard to handle. And in fact, if you try and handle it or roll it, it'll break apart. And that's not what you want. You want to reduce the water content such that you can handle when you are frying, when you're rolling. If you can handle, then you can shape. And these leaves have been shaped. if you don't do the withering step, it can't roll. Or if you do roll, you'll end up throwing everything in the tea bag because you get all these odd broken pieces that don't cooperate. So after withering and after sorting for things that don't belong in the tea leaves, you then apply heat. If you're in Japan, you apply steam. If you're in China, by and large, though not always, you apply heat through a wok or some other tumbler of heat that's 300 or 400 degrees for green tea. And what are you trying to do? You're trying to denature the oxidation enzyme. So what does that mean? What that means is if you don't heat a leaf, then it's the same as apple. Think of an apple. You cut an apple in half, you get a phone call, you forget, 10 minutes later you come back, oh no, the surface of that apple is brown. It is oxidized. The surface components of the apple have interacted with the atmosphere and the oxygen, and the resulting change has been a color and a flavor change. Now, if you're a great cook and you have your phone on do not disturb, you get those apples cut fast, you get them in a mix, you get them in the oven real fast, and they stop. That stops the oxidation enzyme from working. And that's why you still get that crispness of the apple. Yes.
A little bit on energetics. One person's experience is that this is very belly soothing.
Oh my goodness. I love this description. So the energetics for this particular person was belly soothing. And I like this, particularly having seen this article this week that appears to support the fact that green tea, especially of this pick, would, by this pick, I mean this season's pick, not this particular green tea, would help, be a help for the gut microbiota. Yes.
For another, there are teas that help me focus, but my impression of this tea is that it leaves my focus unchanged. It feels relaxing.
This tea for this particular individual feels relaxing, does not help them further focus. It's just a relaxing tea. And I love that description, especially about emerald gates. It's really interesting because usually if somebody comes in here and says, I need great stimulation, I do direct them to a green tea. Not because it's got the most caffeine, it does not, but because just the interaction of its chemical composition seems to be most stimulating to people. And also, usually I tell people, don't drink it on an empty stomach because some people will get a nauseous reaction. That's not everybody. I don't, but some people do. And it's very unpleasant. And apparently what that is the polyphenols interacting with your gastric juices and produces this nausea feeling. But if you have food in there or a little something in there, then that won't happen. All right, so we are denaturing the enzyme in the leaves. When we do that by applying heat, and what do? They usually in China at the farm level, they use their hand, and you notice I have the right hand position, fingers closed. If you have fingers open, this is an open invitation to burn your hand because the wok is extremely hot and you have to be moving your hand fast. And if you leave the fingers open, the leaves come up and your skin touches the hot metal. Not a rookie mistake. You only do that once or twice. So after frying, and every farmer has a different amount of time that they fry. And what are they using to make a judgment about frying? They're using their nose. Their nose tells them when, hey, it's just right. You don't want to burn the leaves. So if they're turning brownish, that's a fail. You notice not even one leaf in here is brown. They fried this just right. And these farmers are experts at that. They know by the smell. Oh, we're getting done. Take it out, let it rest, not for very long, usually an hour or so, and then bake it. Oops, wait a minute, I left out a step. And actually, I inserted another step at the wrong place. So we finished frying, and I said you let it alone. You actually don't let it alone. You don't let it rest at that point, you roll it. Because at that point, the leaves are the most pliable. And if you're trying to achieve a certain shape, then this is the time to roll it. And some producers, so Dragonwell, for those of you who've had Dragonwell before, when they are frying the Dragonwell, they're frying and rolling at the same time. That's why there's not a separate rolling step. So some teas are fried and rolled in one step. Many of them are not. Many of them you fry first, you then roll. It's most pliable at that point. If you're a craft producer, you roll by hand. Usually you roll on a cross-hatched basket. If you want to, some of the farmers have these machines that roll. Those machines are not, they produce a slightly different result, but it's still good enough that you wouldn't throw away the tea. It's good. These were hand rolled, by the way. Hand rolled, and then afterwards, you let it rest slightly, 45 minutes to an hour, and then you bake it. Why in the world do you bake? Didn't you already fry? You fry and bake? Yes, because the baking step at the end is to reduce the moisture down to a certain level. Why do you need to do that? If you don't do that, after 3 or 4 months, particularly if you're living in a humid place, tea leaves will mold. And if you're exporting to Sophie's, you'd better bake that, because not only the mold issue, Chinese customs is ferocious. If tea trying to exit China has too much moisture in it, customs stops the whole shipment and sends a nice little note back. Okay, you know better, and you've got to recheck the whole shipment. That's not a nice note to ever receive. That's a very expensive note by and large to receive. Yes.
Pleasant, refreshing aftertaste and an astringency remain all the way through the cup and after.
Pleasant, refreshing aftertaste with a light astringency all the way through. This is a great comment because the astringency plays just at the tip of my consciousness, but it does play all the way through. And I'm more struck by the refreshing, the freshness, the coolingness as the aftertaste of this. These are the things I'm struck. But when you call that out, that the astringency goes all the way through, it absolutely does. It's in the background. It's like cosmic radiation. It's back there.
Somebody else says it's subtly reminiscent for her of freshly picked tomatoes. I'm not sure whether that's the leaves or the liquor.
So this comment is reminiscent of freshly picked tomatoes. And again, trying to understand this comment, I'm not sure. I think that here's how I interpret this. And if I'm wrong, you can clarify for me. But when you grow tomatoes in your garden, think about that. You grow heirloom tomatoes, you pick one of those, you bite into it, it's a nice hot day, and that freshness of taste, that burst of taste, the freshness, I believe, is what's being referenced here. All right, so we've gotten you through the baking. After the baking, then they go through one more sort process. So with high level teas, this 2-sort process is important. The first sort process is really important because, like I said, no excess protein, no excess earthiness to the tea. We don't need that stuff. The second level of sorting at the end is really done to get uniformity, because as a craft producer, if your tea leaves are uniform, your taste is going to end up being better. You take out the stuff that's not connected. So what do I mean, the stuff that's not connected? That can mean anything. You take out stray leaves or stray stems that don't have leaves attached to them. That's what you're trying to separate out, because remembering the most delicate portion of these leaves are the buds. So if there's stray buds in there, that's fine. But stray leaves, you're not wanting that. You don't need more depth to this tea, because really at this level, these producers are looking for that fresh and that buttery. And the more concentrated you are on the buds, the more of that feeling you're going to have. And again, this is a small run, small production. Now, small in China is relative, isn't it? Because if I tell you 1,700 tons of this is produced, you're going to say, wait a minute, there's a disconnect here. He said small, 1,700 tons sounds like a lot. Well, most of it is being consumed locally. And by locally, let's get ourselves in the right mood here. Hunan province. Hunan province is a huge consumer of green tea. So not much of it is leaving Hunan province. Actually, a little bit does go to Hubei province, which is to its north. But they're staying within the green tea, those two green tea provinces. And again, we found this completely by accident, have loved it since we found it, and continue every year that we can to backfill this. All right, let's see how I'm doing. Oh, I'm doing real good. I got this all in, including Science Corner, before we actually end here. So if there's no further questions, and you can think about that for a minute, because I'm going to talk one more minute. A couple other things I'd like to mention. The first is next week, we go back to oolong tea. Now, we just came off of a set of cliff teas. The oolong tea that you have next week will not be a cliff tea. In fact, it won't even be a Fujian province tea. It'll be a Canton province oolong tea. So it'll be a nice contrast. And this will be kind of the cherry on the cake moment with the oolongs, because this one is done in a cliff tea style, but you'll see quite a difference in terms of flavor. Also, another great thank you to all of you who've been submitting taster notes. Really appreciate that. A blog went up this morning about how to do notes, how to do commentaries for Sophie. So if you need some ideas about that, that's in the blog section. Any pictures that you can send to us are helpful. So again, appreciate everybody's help with this. We continue to do work, great work with the website, and are expecting to do that probably for about 30 more days. So that's where we stand. Great commentary from all of you. Love this session because this is one of our favorite green teas. And again, because of the freshness of it, it just leaves you in a nice high sense of feeling. All right. Be safe this week. And we'll see you next week. You all take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.